Silence filled the spacious office, decorated with expensive furniture and imported artwork. The bluish glow from the computer screen reflected on Lucas's face, a young millionaire used to easy victories. His trembling hands tried to reorganize a spreadsheet that no longer made any sense. For the first time, he realized the empire he had built was crumbling right before his eyes. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the glass table next to scattered papers in complete disarray. Lucas squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hold back the tears that insisted on falling. It wasn't just the financial ruin that hit him, it was the feeling of failure. Everything he thought he controlled with arrogance was slipping through his fingers like sand. He remembered the countless times he had mocked competitors, calling them weak for not knowing how to manage their businesses. Now, ironically, he found himself in the same abyss. The echo of his own proud voice seemed to mock him inside his mind. Life, which until yesterday felt like a game of back-to-back wins, was now showing him its cruelest face. The hours passed, but Lucas remained there, lost in despair. The wall clock showed almost midnight, and the room, though luxurious, felt suffocating. The expensive paintings on the walls and the Persian rug under his feet meant nothing in the face of raw reality. He was broke. For the first time, the weight of loneliness crushed his chest. In a sudden move, he pushed the pile of papers, scattering them across the floor. His breathing was ragged, and a knot in his throat kept him from speaking. Lucas stood up, stared at his own reflection in the window glass, and saw a broken man. The city lights outside seemed to mock his fragility, reminding him that the world kept turning without caring about his pain. With every passing minute, the tears grew stronger. Lucas wasn't just crying over the lost money. He was crying over being exposed as a failure. Since he was young, he had always been seen as the prodigy, the man destined for success. Now that title was crumbling along with his bank accounts. For the first time, he felt ashamed of himself. His phone on the table kept vibrating non-stop, notifications from creditors and messages from angry business partners piling up. He ignored them all, unable to face the storm. The pride that once made him unshakable was now trapping him, keeping him from asking for help. It was as if his own arrogance had dug the hole he was stuck in. Lucas ran his hand through his hair, leaving it messy. The always polished and self-assured young man now looked like a lost boy. The silence in the office became deafening, broken only by the sound of his choked sobs. The weight of his wrong choices fell over him like an avalanche. Part of him wanted to believe there was still a way out, but the spreadsheet didn't lie. Mounting debts, poorly calculated investments, and management mistakes were all there, cold and objective. There was no escaping that truth. For the first time, Lucas understood the meaning of the word powerlessness. While the world slept, he remained locked in that office, surrounded by useless luxury. With every tear shed, the image of the invincible millionaire faded away. Little did Lucas know, this would be the beginning of a transformation that would change not only his life, but also the life of someone he never would have expected.
Can you imagine losing everything overnight, just like Lucas? If stories like this touch your heart and make you think, subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming emotional stories that will change how you see life.
The door opened slowly, breaking the heavy silence in the room. Maria, the cleaner responsible for the nightly cleaning, stepped in quietly. Her footsteps were soft, almost inaudible, yet her presence filled the space with an unexpected sense of calm. In her hands, she held a cloth and a bucket, symbols of her invisible routine in that world of luxury. When she looked up, Maria saw Lucas sitting at his disorganized desk. His face was swollen from tears, showing a vulnerability rarely seen in him.
She didn't say anything at first, just observed him with a calm expression, as if she understood more than she let on. Annoyed by the interruption, Lucas tried to hide his vulnerability. He wiped his face dry and raised his voice to shoo away the unwanted presence. But Maria didn't back off. She stood there, with the same serene look, as if she knew something important was about to be said. "You should rest," she said gently. Her words carried no judgment, only care. It was a simple phrase, but it stood in stark contrast to the weight of the situation. Lucas frowned, confused by the audacity of someone so insignificant offering him advice. "You wouldn't understand, Maria. This isn't something for someone who cleans floors. This is business. Big business." The arrogance in his voice was a desperate attempt to hide his pain. Maria took a deep breath, unoffended. She knew that tone. She'd heard similar words before in other situations. Instead of reacting, she slowly walked toward the desk, subtly straightening some of the scattered papers. Her movements were firm, yet gentle. "You may not understand business, Mr. Lucas, but I know that a true leader doesn't cry over what's lost. He looks for value in what others overlook." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning he couldn't yet grasp. Lucas fell silent, stunned. The words echoed in his mind like a direct hit. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time that night, someone had broken through his wall of pride. Maria finished organizing the papers, picked up her bucket, and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she cast one last look at Lucas, firm yet compassionate. There was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet certainty that she had said what needed to be said. The door closed, leaving Lucas once more. But this time, there was something new stirring in his chest, a restlessness. That simple, direct phrase began repeating in his mind. Without even realizing it, Maria had planted the first seed of the transformation yet to come.
Lucas stayed silent for a few minutes after Maria left. Her words echoed in his mind like an open wound. He tried to convince himself that it didn't matter, that words from a simple cleaner couldn't shake his worldview. But the more he tried to ignore it, the more it bothered him. Unable to handle the restlessness, he stood up and walked toward the door as if he were going to call Maria back. But his pride got the better of him, and he stopped halfway. A tightness in his chest kept him from admitting that someone he saw as beneath him had spoken a truth he couldn't face. Frustrated, Lucas slammed his hand on the desk, scattering the papers once more. The arrogance that always defined him now turned into a shield against his own vulnerability. He started muttering to himself, repeating that she didn't know what she was talking about, that all she understood was scrubbing floors and nothing more. That anger comforted him because it brought back a sense of control, but at the same time, it left him empty. It was as if every harsh word he threw at Maria was a mirror reflecting his own weakness. Deep down, he knew she wasn't the one who was wrong that night. Trying to clear his mind, Lucas reopened the spreadsheet on his computer. The numbers were still a maze of debts and losses. Nothing added up, and the more he reviewed it, the more desperate he felt. The memory of Maria's calmness only irritated him further. "She doesn't know anything about business," he repeated out loud, as if trying to convince himself. But as he said the words, he felt a twinge of doubt. There was something about her calmness, the certainty in what she'd said before leaving, that made him too uncomfortable to ignore. Driven by pride, Lucas picked up his phone and sent a blunt message to one of his business partners. "We'll handle this ourselves tomorrow. We don't need anyone from the outside." It was his way of reasserting control, even though he knew things were slipping further from his grasp. The hours passed, and the young millionaire remained lost in his thoughts. Resentment toward Maria mixed with his fear of facing his failure. Deep down, he didn't know whether he hated her for daring to speak to him that way, or admired her for having the courage to do it. As he lay down on the office couch, exhausted, Lucas muttered to himself, "She doesn't get it. She doesn't get it." But a small voice inside him whispered back, "What if she understands more than you think?" He closed his eyes, trying to silence that doubt. In that moment, pride was his biggest enemy. Instead of admitting his pain and accepting help, Lucas chose to hide behind his arrogance. He didn't know it yet, but that wall of vanity was about to be broken in the most unexpected way. The next morning brought with it an uncomfortable brightness. Lucas woke up with a heavy body and a foggy mind, surrounded by messy papers. As he tried to organize his desk, he noticed a small, worn-out notebook tucked between stacks of documents. Curious, he picked up the simple object, a stark contrast to the expensive materials around it. When he opened the first page, he found meticulous notes, every daily expense carefully recorded, from a coffee bought on the corner to major personal spending. The name written discreetly on the cover surprised him. Maria.
The lines revealed a level of discipline he'd never had. Every number was accompanied by short notes like necessary, unnecessary, or adjust. It was a record kept with impressive care and logic, far beyond what he'd expect from someone without formal education. Lucas flipped through the pages with growing interest. He noticed that Maria didn't just write things down. She also made small projections, estimating how much he'd spend if he kept up certain habits. Her predictions were startlingly accurate. Lucas's heart began to race. He realized that many of the mistakes that had pushed his company to the brink of failure had already been flagged in that notebook in simple and clear terms. It was as if that little book were a map of everything he'd chosen to ignore. He felt a lump in his throat as he remembered what he'd said the night before. "You don't understand anything about business." The irony crushed him. Quietly, Maria had shown she understood financial organization better than he did, the man who prided himself on being a successful businessman. His pride, though, still tried to resist. Lucas wondered if it was all just luck or coincidence. But the more he read, the clearer her hidden talent became. Maria didn't just record, she analyzed. Sitting there, flipping through those pages, Lucas felt ashamed. It was a different kind of shame than the one he'd felt facing bankruptcy. This was personal. He had humiliated someone who could have been his salvation all along. For the first time, the image of the cleaner mopping the floor with her bucket and rag blurred with that of an analytical mind capable of seeing what he couldn't. That duality deeply unsettled him. When he closed the notebook, Lucas stayed still for several long minutes. That simple object in his hands carried enormous weight, proof that maybe he had misjudged people's worth his entire life. Lucas opened the notebook again, unable to believe what was right in front of him. Every one of Maria's notes seemed to tell a story, revealing a clarity about his own finances that he had never possessed. This wasn't just discipline, it was talent. A talent he had completely overlooked, blinded by his own pride. As he compared her notes with his official spreadsheets, the difference became glaring. Where he saw confusion and mistakes, Maria saw patterns and solutions. Her simplicity was exactly what made her calculations so effective. A chill ran down Lucas's spine. For the first time, he admitted that his arrogance may have cost him not just money, but opportunities. If he had listened to Maria sooner, many of the mistakes now dragging him toward bankruptcy could have been avoided. The truth hit him hard. He wasn't as wise as he thought he was. Flipping through a few more pages, he found hand-drawn graphs predicting dips and spikes in spending. He was stunned by their accuracy. It was as if that notebook were a silent guide he'd never had the courage to follow. Yet his pride still made him hesitate. Part of him wanted to dismiss it all as coincidence, but another part, a growing part, knew he was facing something bigger. Maria wasn't just a cleaner. She had a gift that could change everything. Lucas leaned back in his chair, covering his face with his hands. The shame weighed heavier than any debt. He remembered the harsh words he'd said the night before, how he had humiliated her. Now his conscience was demanding a high price.
What if she has the solution? He whispered to himself. The idea seemed absurd, yet somehow inevitable. The world he lived in had always valued titles, degrees, and status. But that notebook proved real wisdom didn't need formal recognition. Lucas's heart raced as doubt grew inside him. He knew he had to make a choice, keep sinking alone, or admit he'd underestimated the one person who might actually be able to help him. As he stood up and looked at the notebook again, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was fragile, still timid, but it was there. Maybe there was still a way out. But to find it, he'd have to take the hardest step of his life: swallow his pride. In that moment, he realized the discovery wasn't just in the numbers. It was in understanding that a person's value isn't measured by their social status. Maria was living proof of that. Now it was up to him to find the courage to admit it. The day passed slowly, sunlight filling the messy office. Lucas paced back and forth, the weight of shame crushing his shoulders. Every time he glanced at the notebook, he remembered the harsh words he'd thrown at Maria. It was a heavy burden to carry. For the first time, the young millionaire wasn't just questioning his skills as a businessman. He was questioning his character as a person. Success had always made him believe he could treat others however he wanted. Now he saw how wrong he'd been. Sitting in his chair, he remembered all the small moments when Maria had subtly tried to steer him toward reason. The way she organized his things, kept everything in order, observed without being noticed. All of it took on new meaning now. The shame grew as he realized the extent of his mistake. He had looked down on the one person who deserved his respect the most. It was like he'd spit on a rare gem simply because he didn't recognize its value beneath the dust. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to convince himself that an apology would be enough. But doubt lingered in his mind. Would she even listen to him after how he'd humiliated her? And more importantly, would she be willing to help him, even after he'd rejected her? His pride, still stubborn, whispered that maybe it was better to just forget the whole thing. But the emptiness in his chest told him he couldn't keep ignoring the truth. Without Maria, there was no way forward. He needed her, and that dependence scared him more than any bankruptcy ever could. He looked out the window at the busy city below. People rushed by, indifferent to his personal drama. For the first time, he felt small in the face of the world. He wasn't the center of anything, just another lost man among millions. The memory of Maria's calm expression from the night before returned to him. She hadn't shown anger, only a quiet strength. It was that look that now pushed him forward, as if silently telling him, "You can still change." Lucas decided he couldn't delay any longer. Regret consumed him, but it also gave him a new kind of strength. If he wanted to save his company and himself, he'd have to face his biggest barrier yet: asking forgiveness from someone he had looked down on. With the notebook in hand, he walked out of his office with resolve. The shame still hurt, but now it was accompanied by something different: determination. Lucas knew his journey of redemption was only beginning, and the first step
was to find Maria.
The walk to Maria's house felt longer than any trip Lucas had ever taken. With every step, his chest grew tighter. He'd never humbled himself to ask for forgiveness before, but now he had no choice. The pride that once armored him now felt like chains he had to break. When he reached her modest home, he hesitated. The front was simple, with plants in makeshift pots and clothes hanging on a line. Nothing like the luxury he was used to, yet it carried a sense of human warmth his own lavish apartment had always lacked. Lucas took a deep breath before knocking. The sound echoed in his mind like a hammer announcing his surrender. For the first time, he didn't know what to expect. Would Maria even listen, or would she simply send him away? The door opened slowly, revealing Maria still wearing an apron stained with soap. Her eyes widened when she saw him, but she didn't seem completely surprised. It was as if she'd been expecting this day to come, as if she knew life has a way of putting everyone in their rightful place. "Mr. Lucas?" she asked, her tone a mix of caution and calm. He swallowed hard, fighting back the shame. I came to apologize," he said, his voice choked. It felt like pulling thorns from his chest. Maria stayed silent for a few seconds, watching him carefully. Lucas looked away, unable to meet the eyes that just the night before had told him more than any speech ever could. The silence was painful but necessary. "An apology doesn't erase what was said," she replied calmly. Her words, though firm, carried no bitterness, only truth. Lucas nodded, knowing he had more to prove than to say. Then he held out the notebook he'd found in his office. "I saw what you did. Your notes. You have a gift, Maria, one I never recognized. I need your help." The sincerity in his voice broke through the mask of arrogance he'd always worn. Maria looked at the notebook, then back at him. She didn't speak right away. In her eyes there was caution, but also a flicker of compassion. After all, it wasn't easy to see someone, even an arrogant man, stripped completely of his pride. "If you're willing to learn, I'll teach, but you need to understand one thing, Mr. Lucas. Respect is the foundation of any partnership," she said firmly. In that moment, a new bridge began to form between them. Days later, Lucas brought Maria to the office. As they walked through the mirrored glass doors, skeptical glances quickly followed. Employees whispered among themselves, surprised to see the cleaner in a different role. The air was thick with judgment. The partners, gathered around the meeting table, stared at Lucas in disbelief. "Is this a joke?" one of them asked, crossing his arms. "You brought the cleaning lady to save the company?" The scorn in his voice was unmistakable. Lucas held his ground, though he felt the weight of their disapproval. Maria, on the other hand, remained calm. She sat quietly, studying the numbers projected on the screen, as if all their judgment meant nothing compared to what needed to be done. "I know it seems unusual," Lucas said, trying to ease the tension, "but she has something we don't: organization, practical insight, and a different way of seeing the numbers. We need her." His words, however, were met with muffled laughter.
One of the senior partners stood up, slamming his hand on the table. "This is insane, Lucas. Our reputation is already in shambles, and you want to finish it off by bringing in someone with no formal education to decide our next moves?" The tension in the room was rising. Maria took a deep breath and asked to speak. Her voice was calm but firm. "I'm not here to take anyone's place. I'm just here to show that sometimes what seems small can be what saves what's big." For a moment, silence fell over the room. The partners stared at her skeptically, but Lucas noticed something different. While some mocked her, others seemed curious. It was as if her calm presence was impossible to ignore. "If she fails, it's on you," one of the partners said, pointing a finger at Lucas, "and it'll be the end of this company." The warning was harsh,
but Lucas didn't back down. For the first time, he seemed certain of his choice. Maria opened her notebook and began explaining her observations. Her simplicity fascinated some and annoyed others. She didn't use technical terms, just practical logic, but the numbers made sense. Slowly, the room began to listen, even if reluctantly. By the end of the meeting, no one was fully convinced, but a seed had been planted. Maria hadn't won everyone over, but she'd made it clear her voice would no longer be ignored. Over the following days, Maria dedicated herself to studying the company's finances. Surrounded by stacks of documents and digital spreadsheets, her attentive eyes searched for hidden patterns. She wasn't intimidated by the complexity of the numbers. In fact, she saw them as an opportunity for a fresh start. Lucas watched her quietly, impressed by the simple yet effective way she organized the data. While he used to complicate things with elaborate formulas and projections, Maria used practical logic and clarity. It was as if she could see what everyone else had overlooked. In a private meeting, Maria laid out her vision. Instead of chasing after big clients who were already jumping ship, she suggested focusing on small business owners. They don't get attention from large firms, but they're the foundation of everything, she explained. Her proposal sounded revolutionary. The partners frowned. "That's crazy," one said. "Small clients don't generate enough profit." But for the first time, Lucas didn't hesitate. They may not bring in huge profits alone, but together they can sustain the company, he replied, backing Maria up. Resistance was still strong, but Lucas's firm support of the idea made it clear something had changed in him. Patiently, Maria offered practical examples and cost comparisons. Her straightforward logic dismantled complex arguments. Little by little, tension gave way to reflection. Some partners, even reluctantly, began to admit that her proposal made sense. It wasn't an easy path, but it was viable. And above all, it was a path no one else had been willing to take. It's not about big numbers, it's about consistency, Maria wrapped up her presentation. If we look where no one else is looking, we'll find value where others only see disregard. Her words left the room silent. Lucas smiled faintly. That was the same essence of what she had told him the night he'd humiliated her. Now, in front of everyone, her words carried weight. He knew they were facing something bigger than just saving the company.
After the meeting, Maria went back to work as if nothing had happened. She wasn't looking for recognition, just results. Lucas, though, felt a deep sense of admiration growing inside him. For the first time, he saw her not just as an employee, but as a partner. And so, a new idea began to take shape, a new hope. The company that had been on the brink of failure was starting to show signs of a different future, thanks to the courage of someone who had always been invisible. The first few weeks of implementation were tough. Shifting the company's focus toward small clients required drastic changes. Teams had to be reorganized, contracts renegotiated, and processes simplified. Chaos seemed inevitable. Many employees resisted, claiming they were wasting time on unimportant business. Some even resigned, unable to believe in the new direction. Lucas, however, surprised everyone by standing his ground, defending Maria in the face of criticism. The first contracts they secured were modest, almost insignificant compared to the company's previous standards. But Maria kept her focus, tracking every bit of progress. To her, every small client was a quiet victory, a step toward rebuilding. Lucas, who used to look down on anything that seemed small, began to see value in the details. With every signed contract, he felt a spark reignite inside him. He wasn't the same man who had cried over spreadsheets anymore. He was learning to look beyond the numbers. One day, while reviewing partial results, Maria showed that the combined revenue from small clients was already covering a significant portion of their costs. It was an unexpected but real victory. Lucas fell silent, moved by the realization that she had been right all along. Word began to spread quietly among the staff. Skepticism, though still present, was slowly giving way to curiosity. Some who had mocked the idea now watched in silence, worried they might be on the wrong side of history. "This is just the beginning," Maria said as she organized the new contracts. Her calm voice stood in contrast to the commotion around her. To her, every solid step forward mattered more than chasing empty promises. Lucas walked over and thanked her quietly. It was the first time he'd done so without feeling ashamed. Respect was growing between them, shaped not just by necessity, but by the trust that had started to blossom. The transformation wasn't just financial. Lucas could feel himself changing on the inside, too. The arrogant man who once saw value only in luxury was slowly becoming someone who could recognize worth where he'd once seen only insignificance. The company still had a long road ahead, but now there was a flame lit. It wasn't just a business being saved. It was a story of redemption being written step by step, guided by the wisdom of someone who had always been overlooked. The early success of the new strategy began to make some people uncomfortable. Those who had doubted Maria were now watching results unfold right before their eyes. But instead of embracing the change, some employees began conspiring behind the scenes. Envy had become a quiet enemy.
Two managers, who felt threatened by Maria's growing influence, began leaking confidential information to competitors. With every report that got out, rival companies adjusted their strategies, trying to stifle the recovery of Lucas's business. Lucas noticed something was wrong when promising contracts started falling through for no clear reason. Clients would suddenly back out, claiming they'd received better offers elsewhere. The pattern kept repeating, and his suspicions grew. Feeling uneasy, Lucas met privately with Maria to review the situation. With her sharp eye, she quickly spotted inconsistencies in their internal communications. It was as if there was a traitor among them, showing their hand before the game even began. "Someone's working against us," Maria said calmly, seeing what others couldn't. Lucas felt anger building in his chest. He couldn't stand the thought of being betrayed from within. They decided to act quietly. Instead of confronting the suspects directly, Maria suggested testing their loyalty. They created false information, carefully shared in private meetings, and waited to see what would happen. It didn't take long for the rumors to reach their competitors. The trap had worked. The traitors had revealed themselves. Lucas felt a mix of relief and fury as his suspicions were confirmed. At the next meeting, he confronted the two men in front of the entire team. His firm voice laid out their betrayal, and the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The managers tried to defend themselves, but it was too late. They were fired on the spot, leaving behind a tense atmosphere among the remaining employees. The mood in the company was shaken, but a lesson had been learned. Maria and Lucas wouldn't be easily defeated. Despite the pain of betrayal, something important was born from it. For the first time, Lucas realized he was acting like a true leader, not just reacting to chaos, but protecting his team and their shared vision. After the traitors were exposed, the company sank into distrust. Many employees feared being falsely accused, while others questioned whether the new business model could really withstand outside pressure. Uncertainty hung in the air. The partners, growing more impatient, demanded that Lucas show concrete results.
Some even suggested abandoning Maria's idea and returning to the old way of doing business. Tension mounted with every meeting. Lucas felt torn. He knew he didn't have enough proof to convince everyone, but he also knew that giving up would mean condemning the company for good. His eyes often turned to Maria, searching for the calm he himself lacked. During one of these meetings, a partner confronted him directly. "Lucas, you're putting the future of this company in the hands of a cleaner. Do you really want to be remembered as the man who destroyed his own legacy?" A heavy silence followed. Maria, however, didn't flinch. "I'm not the future of this company. The future lies in the choices you make today. If you prefer the old path, you already know where it leads. But if you're brave enough to try something new, you'll have a real chance." Her words echoed in the room, stirring discomfort. Some looked away, others took a deep breath, as if hit by a hard truth. Lucas felt proud of her courage, but he knew the final decision rested with him.
He took a deep breath and, for the first time in front of his partners, spoke without fear. "I trust her, and if you don't trust me, you can walk away now. I'd rather rebuild with a few loyal people than keep working with many who don't believe in our future." His statement took everyone by surprise. Some partners threatened to leave, but others, moved by Lucas's conviction, decided to stay. It was a turning point. From that moment on, trust would be their foundation. Maria watched quietly, knowing deep down that this moment marked Lucas's true transformation. He was no longer the arrogant young man he used to be. He was now someone willing to risk everything for what he believed in. The test of trust had been passed, but it was clear that the real challenges were just beginning. The bigger battle was still ahead, and both of them would need every ounce of courage to face it. The date for the investor meeting was set, and the mood in the company grew tense. Everyone knew this presentation would decide whether the company would rise again or be sold off for next to nothing. Lucas paced nervously, but Maria remained calm, quietly reviewing her notes. The conference room was packed. Men and women in expensive suits waited impatiently, their eyes sharp and calculating. To them, this was just another chance to profit from someone else's downfall. To Lucas, it was his chance to prove his vision still had life. When the moment arrived, everyone expected Lucas to take the lead, but to everyone's surprise, he stepped back and gave the floor to Maria. Whispers spread across the room. Some chuckled quietly, unable to believe what they were seeing. Maria walked to the front with steady steps, unshaken by the dismissive looks around her. She placed her notebook on the table and began to speak. Her voice wasn't commanding, but it carried a clarity and sincerity that held people's attention. Instead of showing complex charts, she told stories about small clients who had benefited from the new approach. Every example was real, every detail backed by tangible results. Her simple approach reached people in ways cold numbers never could. Slowly, the laughter faded into silence. The investors, used to technical speeches and corporate jargon, found themselves drawn to words that spoke about people, not just profits. Maria showed them that small clients weren't just numbers. They were lives holding everything together. Lucas watched from the audience, proud and emotional. It was as if he had finally understood what true leadership meant, not speaking for yourself, but giving a voice to those who have something valuable to say. At the end of her presentation, Maria concluded, "What seems small can be the foundation of something great. Value isn't only in what shines, it's also in what quietly holds everything up." Her words hung in the air, leaving the investors deep in thought. The silence was broken by a soft round of applause, then another. Gradually, the entire room rose to their feet, acknowledging the power of a simple truth. Lucas felt his eyes well up, not with sadness, but with pride. In that moment, it no longer mattered who had laughed or doubted. The company had a new soul, and that soul was a voice that once had been ignored. Despite the warm reception, there was still one obstacle left. A key investor, responsible for the largest share of funding, remained silent. His skeptical eyes studied Maria coldly, as if her words hadn't reached him at all.
"Nice speech, but sentimentality doesn't pay debts," he said, shattering the positive atmosphere. The room fell silent, and tension returned. The company's future was still on the line. Lucas stood up to intervene, but Maria subtly raised her hand, signaling him to trust her. With quiet confidence, she stepped back into the center of the room. Her expression showed no fear, only resolve. "You're right. Speeches don't pay debts, but the right decisions do. And the right decision right now is to look where no one else is looking." Her words, simple and direct, landed like a perfectly aimed strike. The investor raised an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. Maria then opened her notebook and showed precise numbers, comparing results before and after the new model. It was impossible to deny. The progress was there, even if still in its early stages. Still, the man remained hesitant. "It's too risky," he shot back. That's when Maria took a deep breath and repeated the words she had told Lucas on the night he'd humiliated her. "A true leader doesn't cry over what's lost. They look for value in what others overlook." The room fell into absolute silence. The phrase, filled with wisdom, seemed to resonate not just with the investor, but with everyone present. It was more than a business lesson. It was a life lesson. The investor stared at Maria for what felt like an eternity, until finally a faint smile appeared on his face. "Courage and vision, two rare qualities. I'm in." Relief washed over the room, and a murmur of celebration spread through the crowd. Lucas took a deep breath, feeling a wave of gratitude. If it weren't for Maria, this moment would never have happened. He realized that trusting her had been the best decision of his life. The company was saved, but more than that, it had been reborn with a new essence, one that blended humility and innovation, strength and simplicity, all thanks to someone who had once been invisible. The contract with the investors was signed that same afternoon, sealing the company's rebirth. For Lucas, the weight on his shoulders finally began to lift. He looked at Maria and for the first time didn't see her as an employee, but as an equal. There was a strength in her that went far beyond numbers. The days that followed were filled with deep transformation. The inclusive business model began to spread, attracting media attention and inspiring other entrepreneurs. The company that was once a symbol of arrogance had now become an example of innovation and humanity. Employees who had once doubted now became engaged, inspired by Maria's firm yet humble presence. Respect grew naturally, not because of her title, but because of her impact. Her voice, once ignored, was now listened to carefully. Lucas, meanwhile, was undergoing an even deeper personal change. The arrogant young man who used to look down on everyone was being replaced by someone willing to listen, learn, and appreciate others. He knew this transformation was only possible because he'd have the courage to admit his mistakes. At a special meeting in front of the entire team, Lucas made an announcement that surprised everyone. "From today on, Maria isn't just part of the team. She's my business partner, and together we're going to build a new story." The room erupted in applause, but Maria simply smiled quietly.
The title of partner didn't go to her head. Her purpose had always been bigger than that.
For her, the real victory was seeing the company grow fairly, valuing those who had once been invisible. That was the legacy she wanted to leave. Soon, the impact spread beyond the company's walls. Other businesses began adopting similar models, recognizing that the future lay in valuing what had once been overlooked. Maria and Lucas became symbols of a quiet revolution. Despite their success, Maria never changed who she was. She remained humble, with the same calm presence and quiet strength. Lucas deeply admired that, seeing in her the wisdom he'd always searched for in titles and degrees, but had only found in humility. The story that had begun with tears and humiliation now ended with respect and partnership. The contrast was so stark it almost seemed unbelievable. But deep down, they both knew it was in their lowest moments that true strength had revealed itself. And so, the journey of Lucas and Maria became a testament to the idea that a person's worth goes far beyond appearances. Where there had once been arrogance and disregard, a partnership was born, one capable of transforming not just a company, but how the world sees the power of simplicity. From humiliation grew a partnership that changed destinies. And here, every story carries a lesson that can touch your life too. So don't wait. Subscribe now and join this community that believes in the power of meaningful stories to change the world.